He leaned back in his chair, $5,000 suit, $20,000 watch, the kind of smile that only comes from believing you've already won. Marcus Williams turned to his attorney, one of the most ruthless probate lawyers in California, and whispered just loud enough for the front row to hear, "Look at her. My sister can't even afford a lawyer. This is pathetic." Across the aisle sat Emma, alone. No legal team, no briefcase, just a worn spiral notebook and a ballpoint pen that probably cost $1. She'd been a high school English teacher for 15 years, making $60,000 a year while Marcus traded billions from his hedge fund office overlooking San Francisco Bay. He'd frozen their late father's entire $40 million estate, filed motions claiming she was mentally unstable, forged psychiatric reports, cut her off completely, and now, in this courtroom, he was about to take everything. The judge shuffled her papers, ready to call the case. That's when the heavy oak doors at the back of the room swung open. The woman who walked in made the entire courtroom go silent. She wore a tailored charcoal suit with the precision of someone who'd walked into the Supreme Court. Silver-streaked hair pulled back, sharp eyes that had read 1,000 liars like open books. She carried a leather portfolio that looked like it weighed more than Emma's entire case, because it probably contained more evidence than Marcus knew existed. Marcus's smile died on his lips. His attorney's pen clattered onto the table. Because the woman walking toward Emma, the sister Marcus thought was too poor, too stupid, too nothing to fight back, wasn't just any lawyer. She was Justice Elena Rodriguez, Federal Circuit Court judge, Harvard law legend, former Solicitor General of the United States, the woman who'd written landmark decisions on elder abuse law, who'd argued before the Supreme Court 5 times and won 4, who'd made grown attorneys cry during oral arguments. And she was about to take personal leave to represent her college roommate. Elena placed her files on Emma's table, thick, organized, devastating. She turned to face Marcus, and when she spoke, her voice could have frozen California in summer. "Mr. Williams, you made one critical mistake. You assumed your sister was alone." Marcus went pale. His attorney looked like she'd just been handed a suicide mission, because what was supposed to be a 20-minute formality was about to become the most brutal takedown of greed, fraud, and family betrayal ever recorded in a California courtroom. You're about to witness a federal judge systematically destroy a man who thought $40 million made him untouchable. But first, you need to understand how we got here. This story begins not with money, but with 2 children and a father who built an empire from nothing. Robert Williams grew up poor, so poor that he wore the same pair of shoes until they had holes, so poor that he knew what it meant to be hungry. When he made his fortune in real estate development, he never forgot where he came from. He had 2 children, Emma, his youngest, who wanted to teach, and Marcus, his eldest, who wanted to win. Robert loved them both, but he only respected one. And that difference, that quiet choice a father made about what mattered more, kindness or wealth, would eventually lead to this courtroom, this moment, this reckoning. Because $40 million doesn't just reveal who you are. It reveals who you've always been. Let me take you back to where the betrayal began. 23 years earlier, Robert Williams stood in the kitchen of a house he'd just closed on, his first development deal. His hands were calloused from years of construction work. His suit was borrowed, and his children sat at the table eating cereal because that's all they had that morning. Emma was 7. Marcus was 10. And their father was about to become a millionaire. "You see this?" Robert held up the signed contract. "This piece of paper doesn't make me better than anyone. It just means I got lucky and worked hard. Don't you ever forget where we came from." Marcus nodded, but his eyes were already calculating. Emma just smiled and asked if they could donate some of Dad's old shoes to her friend whose family didn't have any. That was the difference between them. That was always the difference. Over the next 2 decades, Robert built an empire. $40 million in commercial real estate across Northern California. But he still drove a 10-year-old Toyota. Still had coffee at the same diner every Sunday. still remembered every person who'd helped him when he had nothing. Emma followed in those footsteps. She got her teaching credential and took a job at the same underfunded public school Robert had attended as a kid. She made $60,000 a year and spent half of it on supplies for students whose families couldn't afford notebooks. She was her father's daughter in every way that mattered. Marcus went to Wharton, then Wall Street, then started his own hedge fund. He made millions, then tens of millions. He bought penthouses and yachts and wore suits that cost more than Emma's monthly rent. And every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, he'd show up and ask the same question. Dad, when are you going to admit Emma's wasting her life? Robert's answer never changed. Son, your sister is the only one of us actually living. That answer gnawed at Marcus, ate at him, because in his world, wealth was the scoreboard and Emma was losing. He couldn't understand why their father looked at her with such pride, such tenderness, while looking at him with something that felt dangerously close to disappointment. Then came the will reading, or rather, the private conversation Robert had with both of them 3 years ago when he was still sharp, still himself. I'm splitting everything 50-50, Robert said. Marcus, you don't need it, but you'll get your half anyway. Emma, I want you to use your share to start something I never could, a scholarship foundation for kids like we were. Kids who deserve a chance. Marcus smiled and nodded and said all the right things. Then he spent the next year trying to convince Robert to change his mind. She's not a businesswoman, Dad. She'll waste it. Let me manage everything. I'll set up the foundation myself. But Robert refused. Your sister has something you'll never understand, son. She knows what money's for. That rejection was the beginning of the end. 2 years ago, Robert started forgetting things. Small things at first, where he'd parked, what he'd had for breakfast. The doctors called it early-stage dementia, manageable but progressive. Marcus called it an opportunity. Within 3 months, Marcus had moved Robert into an exclusive memory care facility in Marin County. Beautiful, expensive, and completely under Marcus's control. He told Emma the doctors recommended limited visits to avoid confusion. He told the facility staff that Emma was unstable and shouldn't be allowed access without his approval. That approval never came. For 18 months, Emma left voicemails her father never received. Sent letters the staff never delivered. Showed up at the facility only to be turned away by security guards with apologetic faces and strict orders. Inside, Robert asked for her every single day. Asked where his Emma was. Why she'd abandoned him. And Marcus, visiting twice a week in his tailored suits, would lean close and whisper, "She doesn't care about you anymore, Dad. She only cared about the money. But don't worry, I'm here." 6 months ago, Robert Williams died. Confused. Alone. Believing his daughter had forgotten him. The funeral was small. Emma sat in the front row, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Marcus sat 3 seats away, checking his phone, already planning his next move. Because Marcus had spent those final 18 months doing more than just lying to their father. He'd been forging documents, draining accounts, building a case to prove Emma was unfit to inherit a single dollar. And he'd almost gotten away with it. Almost. Back in the courtroom, Judge Patricia Morrison adjusted her reading glasses and opened the case file with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd presided over 1,000 family wars. She was in her late 50s, gray hair cut short, face lined with the particular weariness that comes from watching people destroy each other over money. "We're here today regarding the estate of Robert Williams, deceased," she began, her voice flat and procedural. "Mr. Williams, you've filed a motion to remove your sister as co-beneficiary of your father's estate. Ms. Williams, you're appearing pro se." Emma stood, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morrison's expression softened for just a moment, the kind of look that said she'd seen this before, the look that said Emma didn't stand a chance. Then the professional mask slid back into place. "Very well. Ms. Chun, you may proceed." Victoria Chun rose like a predator that had just spotted wounded prey. She was everything Marcus had paid for. Stanford Law, 20 years of probate litigation, a win record that made other attorneys refuse to oppose her. She wore a burgundy suit that probably cost more than Emma's car, and when she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. Your Honor, this is a tragically simple case. Victoria began, her voice smooth as poisoned honey. My client's sister is suffering from severe mental instability that makes her unfit to manage any portion of this substantial estate. We have psychiatric evaluations confirming diagnoses of paranoid delusions, emotional dysregulation, and financial incompetence. She slid a folder across to the judge. Official letterhead, doctor's signatures, clinical language that sounded absolutely damning. Emma's hand gripped the edge of her table. That's not. I never. Ms. Williams, you'll have your chance to respond, Judge Morrison said, though her tone suggested it wouldn't matter much. Victoria continued, building momentum like a prosecutor who'd already secured the conviction. Furthermore, Your Honor, the respondent's financial history demonstrates shocking irresponsibility. She earns a poverty-level salary of $60,000 per year, has minimal savings, and has been described by financial experts as incapable of managing even basic investments. She projected a spreadsheet onto the courtroom screen, Emma's tax returns, her checking account balance, every financial vulnerability laid bare for the room to judge. She lives paycheck to paycheck, Your Honor. We're discussing a $40 million estate. This woman cannot be trusted with such resources. Marcus leaned toward Victoria, his whisper carrying across the silent courtroom. She teaches Shakespeare to teenagers. I trade billions. This is embarrassing for her. Victoria's lips curved slightly. She was enjoying this. But perhaps most disturbing, Your Honor, is the evidence of undue influence. Victoria's voice dropped, taking on a tone of concerned gravity. We have testimony from my client that in the months before Robert Williams's death, his daughter engaged in aggressive, manipulative behavior. She screamed at him, threatened him, told him that if he didn't include her in the will, she would abandon him completely. That's a lie. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I was never even allowed to see him. Marcus blocked every. Ms. Williams, sit down, Judge Morrison said sharply. You're not represented by counsel. You cannot make objections without proper standing. Emma sank back into her chair, her hands shaking. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of Marcus. Victoria presented more evidence. Emails that Emma had allegedly sent, filled with angry demands and threats. Financial records suggesting Emma had tried to access Robert's accounts without permission. Every document perfectly fabricated. Every lie wrapped in official-looking paper. Your Honor, we're not asking for a trial, Victoria concluded. We're asking for common sense. The respondent is mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and manipulated a vulnerable elderly man in his final days. She should not receive $1 of this estate. We move for immediate summary judgment. Judge Morrison looked at Emma, alone, silent, drowning. Ms. Williams, do you have any response to these allegations? Emma opened her mouth, closed it. What could she say? She had no evidence. No witnesses. No lawyer to translate her truth into legal language that a court would accept. She had nothing. Your Honor, That's when the courtroom doors opened, and everything changed. The woman who walked down the center aisle didn't hurry. She didn't need to. Every step was deliberate, measured, the kind of entrance that made people lean forward in their seats without realizing they were doing it. She was maybe 50, with silver streaking through dark hair pulled back in a flawless twist. Her charcoal suit was tailored to perfection. Not flashy, not expensive looking, just absolutely right. She carried a leather portfolio that looked like it weighed 20 pounds. And her eyes swept the courtroom with the calm assessment of someone who'd walked into far more intimidating rooms than this. Victoria Chen's face went white. Actually white. Judge Morrison straightened in her chair, eyes widening in recognition. And Marcus looked like he'd just watched his yacht sink in the harbor. The woman reached Emma's table and set down her portfolio with a soft thud that somehow felt like a gavel strike. She turned to face the judge, and when she spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades making powerful people listen. Your Honor, I'm Justice Elena Rodriguez of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm filing notice of appearance as counsel for Emma Williams, effective immediately. I've taken a formal leave of absence from the bench under Judicial Code 2.11, which permits personal representation in extraordinary circumstances involving immediate family or individuals with whom the justice has a close personal relationship. She slid a document across to the clerk. Official court seal. Signed by the Chief Justice himself. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Someone in the back row actually gasped. Judge Morrison leaned forward, suddenly very interested in a case she'd been about to dismiss 5 seconds ago. Justice Rodriguez. This is highly unusual. Yes, Your Honor. But so is watching a federal crime unfold in a probate courtroom. Elena's voice was ice wrapped in silk. I believe Ms. Chun was about to request summary judgment based on forged psychiatric evaluations, fabricated evidence, and perjured testimony. I'm here to ensure that doesn't happen. Victoria Chun found her voice, though it came out strangled. Your Honor, this is... The respondent didn't indicate she had counsel. We weren't notified. Ms. Chun, are you objecting to the respondent having legal representation? Elena turned to face Victoria directly. Because that would be a fascinating position for a member of the California bar to take. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. Elena placed her hand on Emma's shoulder. A gesture so simple, so human, that it made the whole room remember these were people, not just legal adversaries. Emma looked up at her with tears streaming down her face, but now they were different tears. Relief, hope, the kind of tears that come when you realize you're not drowning alone anymore. Your Honor, I graduated Harvard Law with Emma Williams 23 years ago, Elena continued. We were roommates, best friends. When I was a first-generation immigrant convinced I didn't belong in those classrooms, Emma Williams was the only person who told me I was wrong. She studied with me until 3 in the morning. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She is the reason I'm standing in this courtroom today. Elena turned to look at Marcus, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Williams, you made one critical error in your elaborate scheme. You assumed your sister was alone. You assumed that a woman who spent her life building genuine relationships, who valued people over profit, connection over conquest, would have no one to stand beside her when it mattered most. She opened her portfolio, revealing stacks of documents organized with tabs and highlights, and the kind of meticulous preparation that made Victoria Chen's folder look like a high school book report. You were wrong. Marcus had gone from pale to gray. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair like a man on a sinking ship reaching for something, anything solid. Victoria Chen shuffled through her papers with shaking hands, suddenly realizing that every forged document, every fabricated claim, every lie she'd built her case on was about to be systematically destroyed by one of the most brilliant legal minds in America. Judge Morrison set down her pen and folded her hands. Ms. Chen, you said you were about to request summary judgment. Do you still wish to proceed with that motion? The silence stretched out like a noose. Your Honor, perhaps we should revisit our strategy. I thought so. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed. And we have quite a lot to discuss. Elena didn't waste a single second. She pulled a document from her portfolio with the precision of a surgeon selecting the right scalpel. Your Honor, let's begin with the psychiatric evaluations Ms. Chun presented as evidence of my client's mental instability. Specifically, the evaluation allegedly conducted by Dr. Michael Hendricks, license number PSY 47829, dated March 15th of this year. Victoria Chen's head snapped up. Something in Elena's tone told her what was coming, and it was going to hurt. Elena placed a document on the overhead projector. The psychiatric evaluation appeared on the screen, official letterhead, clinical language, damning conclusions about Emma's mental state. This document claims to be from Dr. Michael Hendricks of San Francisco. It diagnoses Ms. Williams with paranoid delusions, emotional dysregulation, and recommends she be deemed legally incompetent to manage financial affairs. Elena paused, letting the words hang in the air. There's just one small problem, Your Honor. She placed another document on the projector. A death certificate. Dr. Michael Hendricks died in 2019. He's been deceased for 6 years. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter's fingers froze over the keys. The license number PSY 47829 does belong to a real psychiatrist, Dr. Patricia Hendricks of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She's 78 years old, retired since 2015, and has never set foot in California. Elena produced a sworn affidavit. This is her statement, notarized yesterday, confirming she has never evaluated Emma Williams and has never authorized anyone to use her license number. Judge Morrison's face had gone from interested to furious. Ms. Chun, did you verify these credentials before filing? Victoria was frantically flipping through her files, her professional composure shattering in real time. Your Honor, my client provided these documents. I was assured they were authentic. Your client lied to you, Ms. Chun. Elena's voice cut through the excuses like a blade. And now you've submitted fraudulent evidence to this court. Elena wasn't finished. She placed a new folder in front of the judge. These are Emma Williams's actual medical records, provided voluntarily with complete authorization. Primary care physician, annual checkups, complete mental health history. No diagnoses of any kind. No history of instability. No psychiatric treatment whatsoever. She added another stack of papers. These are letters from Emma's principal, Dr. Sarah Chun of Lincoln High School, where Emma has taught for 15 years, from her department chair, from 12 of her colleagues, from the school psychologist who works with her daily. Elena began reading, her voice steady and clear. Quote, Emma Williams is the most emotionally stable and compassionate educator I have worked with in 30 years of administration. She handles crisis situations with remarkable calm and has been a mentor to countless struggling students. Another letter. Ms. Williams is the person other teachers go to when they're having difficulties. She is patient, rational, and demonstrates exceptional judgment in all professional situations. And another. I have never witnessed Ms. Williams raise her voice, lose her temper, or behave in any manner that could be described as unstable. She is a model of emotional regulation and professional conduct. 15 letters. Every single one describing a woman who was the exact opposite of what Marcus had claimed. Judge Morrison's jaw was tight. Ms. Chun, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where did these psychiatric evaluations come from? Victoria looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his shoes. My client provided them, Your Honor, Victoria said quietly, and the way she said it made clear she finally understood what she'd walked into. Elena stepped forward, and her voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Your Honor, this isn't just a false claim. This is defamation. This is fraud upon the court. This is a deliberate attempt to use forged medical documents to strip a woman of her inheritance. She turned to face Marcus directly. Mr. Williams commissioned these fake evaluations. He paid someone to forge a dead doctor's credentials. He created an elaborate fiction about his sister's mental health and presented it as fact in a court of law. Marcus started to stand. That's not. I didn't. Sit down, Mr. Williams, Judge Morrison snapped. You'll have your chance to explain yourself. Though I suspect anything you say at this point will only make things worse. Elena placed one more document on the projector. An invoice. Paper trail. Payment from Marcus Williams to a company called Professional Documentation Services. A known document forgery operation that had been shut down by the FBI 3 months ago. He didn't just lie, Your Honor. He paid for those lies. Every evaluation. Every forged signature. Every fabricated diagnosis. All of it traceable directly back to Marcus Williams. The courtroom had gone from silent to suffocating. Even the bailiff looked shocked. Victoria Chin slowly closed her folder. Her case, the one she thought was a simple probate dispute, had just revealed itself as a criminal conspiracy. And Elena Rodriguez was just getting started. Elena returned to her portfolio and extracted a thick binder with colored tabs protruding from the edges like battle flags. She held it up for the court to see. Your Honor, what I'm about to present is the result of 72 hours of forensic accounting, conducted by a team I borrowed from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. They traced every single dollar that moved through Robert Williams's estate from the moment Marcus obtained power of attorney 2 years ago until Robert's death 6 months ago. She placed the first page on the projector. Bank statements, account numbers, transaction histories with certain entries highlighted in yellow. Robert Williams's estate was valued at $42 million at the time of his dementia diagnosis. It should currently be worth approximately $43 million, accounting for conservative investment returns and minimal care expenses. Elena paused, her finger hovering over a number at the bottom of the page. The actual current value is $38 million. Judge Morrison leaned forward. $4 million is missing? Not missing, Your Honor. Stolen. Elena clicked to the next page. A wire transfer record appeared on screen, highlighted in red. March 2024. Marcus Williams, acting under power of attorney, transferred $800,000 from his father's primary investment account to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands called MW Holdings LLC. Another click. Another transfer. June 2024. Another $750,000 to the same account. Click, click, click. Each transaction appeared like bullets being loaded into a chamber. Over 18 months, Marcus Williams systematically drained $4.2 million from his father's estate into offshore accounts that he controlled. Every transfer was authorized using the power of attorney his father gave him, not to steal from him, but to protect him. Elena produced another document. This is the corporate registration for MW Holdings LLC, filed in the Cayman Islands. The beneficial owner is Marcus Williams. The same Marcus Williams sitting in this courtroom claiming his sister is financially irresponsible. Marcus's face had gone from gray to ashen. His attorney wouldn't even look at him anymore. But Elena wasn't finished. She pulled up another set of records. Purchase agreements, receipts, invoices, each one more damning than the last. In August 2024, while Robert Williams was living in a memory care facility, Marcus purchased a yacht, a 60-foot Azimuth. Price, $2.3 million. She displayed the invoice. The payment came from Robert's estate account, categorized as medical equipment and therapeutic expenses. Someone in the gallery actually laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound quickly stifled. In November 2024, Marcus purchased a penthouse in Miami Beach. $1.8 million. Once again, the funds came from his father's estate, this time categorized as extended care facility deposit. Elena's voice was clinical, precise, like a coroner documenting cause of death. Robert Williams never stepped foot in Miami. He was in California the entire time, living in a modest care facility in Marin County. She pulled up the care facility's actual billing records. Oak Grove Memory Care charged $8,000 per month for Robert's room and care, standard rate for a semi-private room with basic services. Then she displayed Marcus's billing to the estate. $45,000 per month. Marcus submitted invoices to the estate claiming his father required premium private care, specialized nursing, and experimental treatments. The math was simple enough for everyone in the courtroom to do. $37,000 per month. 18 months. Over $650,000 pocketed as pure profit while his father lived in a room that cost a fraction of what Marcus claimed. Those were loans. Marcus stood abruptly, his voice cracking. Business investments. I was going to pay it all back with interest. I was managing the estate, making it grow. Elena turned to face him, and her voice cut through his excuses like a blade through silk. Loans require documentation, Mr. Williams. Loan agreements, promissory notes, repayment schedules, interest terms, legal authorization. She held up her empty hands. You have none of that, because these weren't loans. She stepped closer, and the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. These were theft. You stole from your dying father. You forged medical expenses to buy yourself a yacht. You inflated his care costs by 600% and pocketed the difference while he sat in that facility asking where his daughter was. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. There was nothing left to say. The numbers didn't lie, and Elena Rodriguez had every single receipt. Your Honor, Elena said, turning back to the judge. I have copies of every transaction, every forged invoice, every fraudulent categorization. And I've already forwarded all of this to the district attorney's office and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and pressed her fingers to her temples. Ms. Chun, does your client have any response to these allegations that doesn't involve the word loan? Victoria Chun sat frozen, staring at documents she'd never been shown, realizing she'd been used as cover for a criminal enterprise. No, Your Honor, she whispered. I don't believe he does. Elena let the silence settle like ash after an explosion. Then she spoke, her voice softer now, but somehow more dangerous. Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. The courtroom doors opened again, and an older woman walked in, late 60s, gray hair, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying herself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd spent a lifetime in service to others. She had kind eyes, but they were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying recently. Dr. Mitchell took the stand, was sworn in, and settled into the chair with her hands folded in her lap. Dr. Mitchell, can you tell the court your relationship to Robert Williams? Elena asked. I was his primary care physician for 30 years. Dr. Mitchell said, her voice steady but soft. I saw him through everything, his business successes, his wife's death, his children's lives. He was more than a patient. He was a friend. And you continued to see him after he was moved to Oak Grove Memory Care? Yes, I visited him twice a month, right up until he passed. Dr. Mitchell's hands tightened slightly. I wanted to make sure he was comfortable, that he wasn't alone. Elena approached the witness stand. Dr. Mitchell, in those final months, did Robert ever mention his daughter Emma? The doctor's eyes filled with tears. Every single visit. Every time I saw him, he'd ask where she was. When is Emma coming? Has Emma called? Did Emma get my messages? She paused, wiping her eyes with a tissue. He missed her desperately. He didn't understand why she'd stopped visiting. Did you tell him the truth? I tried to. I told him Emma had been calling, that she'd tried to see him. Dr. Mitchell's voice cracked. But the facility staff, they'd been instructed by Marcus to tell Robert that Emma didn't want to see him anymore, that she was too busy, that she'd moved on with her life. Emma let out a small, broken sound from her table. Elena placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Dr. Mitchell, did Robert ever express concerns about his will? Constantly. He was terrified that Marcus would try to cut Emma out. He told me at least a dozen times that he wanted to make sure Emma got her half, that she was supposed to use it for the scholarship foundation. The doctor turned to look directly at Judge Morrison. He tried to change his will 4 times in those final months to make absolutely certain Emma was protected. But Marcus told the lawyers Robert was too confused, that he wasn't competent to make legal decisions. Elena produced a document. Dr. Mitchell, did you ever evaluate Robert's mental competency? Yes. Marcus requested it, actually. He wanted documentation that Robert was incompetent. She shook her head. But Robert wasn't incompetent. He had dementia, yes, he forgot recent conversations, struggled with names sometimes. But he knew exactly who he was, who his children were, and what he wanted done with his estate. I documented that he was legally competent to make decisions about his own care and finances. Marcus wasn't happy with that assessment. Did you provide that documentation to Marcus? I did. He never filed it with the court. Elena paused, letting that sink in. Then she pulled something from her portfolio. A sealed envelope, slightly yellowed, with Emma's name written on it in shaky handwriting. Dr. Mitchell, do you recognize this? The doctor's face crumpled. Yes, Robert gave it to me 3 weeks before he died. It was during a private moment. Marcus had stepped out of the room. Robert pressed it into my hands and said, "Give this to Emma. Don't let Marcus see it. Promise me." She looked at Elena. I kept it. I waited for the right moment. I'm sorry it took so long. Elena held up the envelope. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this letter into evidence and read it for the record. Judge Morrison nodded, her expression grave. Elena carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. Robert's handwriting trembled across the page, but every word was clear. She began to read, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was saying. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and Marcus has tried to take everything. Don't let him. You were the child who loved people, not money. I want you to have half of everything, not because you need it, but because I know you'll use it to help others. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stop him. Please don't give up. Love, Dad. The courtroom was utterly silent except for the sound of Emma sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere beyond grief. Elena handed her a tissue, then another, but Emma couldn't stop crying. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes like she could somehow push the pain back inside. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and wiped her own eyes with the back of her hand. The court reporter was crying. Even the bailiff turned away, clearing his throat roughly. Marcus sat completely still, frozen like a statue. His face drained of all color. Every eye in the courtroom was on him now, and the hatred was palpable, thick enough to choke on. He'd stolen from his dying father. He'd lied to everyone. But worse than that, so much worse, he'd made sure Robert Williams died believing his daughter had abandoned him. That was the unforgivable part. And everyone in that room knew it. Elena gave the courtroom 30 seconds to collect itself, to process what they'd just heard, to understand exactly who Marcus Williams was. Then she moved forward again, and her voice had shifted. Harder now, colder. The voice of someone preparing to deliver a final blow. Your Honor, I have additional evidence that I believe this court needs to see. It pertains to elder abuse. Judge Morrison's head snapped up. Elder abuse? Yes, Your Honor. Elena walked to a laptop connected to the courtroom's display system. Oak Grove Memory Care has security cameras in all common areas and hallways, as required by California law for facilities housing vulnerable adults. I've obtained footage from the last 6 months of Robert Williams's life. She pressed play. The screen showed a hallway outside a residence room. The timestamp read October 2024. The door opened and Marcus walked in, carrying a briefcase and wearing the same kind of expensive suit he wore now. The footage cut to another angle, inside the room, captured from a camera position to monitor patient safety. Robert sat in a chair by the window, looking confused and small. Marcus loomed over him, his body language aggressive, pointing at documents spread across the table. There was no audio, but they didn't need it. Marcus's face was contorted with frustration, his finger jabbing at the papers. Robert shook his head slowly, clearly not understanding. Marcus grabbed his father's hand, roughly, forcefully, and pressed a pen into it, then physically guided the old man's hand across the document. Robert's face showed fear, actual fear of his own son. The courtroom watched in horrified silence as Marcus did it again with another document, and another, each time more aggressive when Robert hesitated or seemed confused. "This is from 3 months before Robert died," Elena said quietly. Marcus is forcing his father to sign power of attorney amendments that gave Marcus additional control over estate distributions. She played another clip. This one showed Marcus yelling, his mouth moving rapidly, his face red, his hands gesturing violently. Robert had shrunk back in his chair, his hands raised defensively. Emma turned away, unable to watch. Elena stopped the footage. "Your Honor, I have 47 separate recordings showing similar interactions. Each one documents Marcus Williams intimidating, manipulating, and physically coercing his elderly, confused father into signing documents." She pulled out medical records next, each page marked with red flags. "These are from Robert's care file. October 18th. Bruising on right wrist, consistent with forceful gripping. November 3rd. Bruising on left forearm. November 29th. Bruising on both wrists and right shoulder." Elena turned to face the courtroom. The nurses documented this. They photographed it. And when one of them tried to report it, she was fired. "Your Honor," a woman's voice called from the gallery. "May I approach?" Judge Morrison looked up as a woman in her 40s stood, wearing scrubs, her face nervous but determined. "This is Jennifer Reeves," Elena said. She was Robert's primary nurse until Marcus had her terminated for insubordination. Jennifer approached the witness stand, was sworn in, and sat down with her hands trembling slightly. "Ms. Reeves, can you tell the court what you witnessed?" Elena asked gently. "I saw Marcus hurting Mr. Williams," Jennifer said, her voice shaking but clear. "Not just emotionally, physically. He'd grab his wrists when Mr. Williams wouldn't sign things. He'd shake him. One time I walked in and Marcus had his hand on his father's throat. Not choking him, but threatening him. Mr. Williams was crying. Her voice broke. I reported it to my supervisor. I documented everything according to protocol. I filed a report with the ombudsman." She looked at Judge Morrison. "The next day, Marcus came in with lawyers and had me fired. They said I was making false accusations against a family member. They threatened to destroy my nursing license if I ever spoke about it." "But you kept the documentation?" "I made copies of everything before they deleted it from the system. I knew someone needed to know what he was doing to that sweet old man." Judge Morrison set down her pen with such force it sounded like a gavel strike. "Ms. Rodriguez, this goes beyond probate court. This is criminal elder abuse, physical abuse, financial exploitation. This is felony territory."
Elena nodded slowly.
"I'm aware, Your Honor. I've already forwarded all evidence. The security footage, medical records, witness statements, and financial documentation to the district attorney's office. I've also been in contact with the California Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I expect criminal charges to be filed within 48 hours. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus looked like he might vomit. Victoria Chan stood abruptly, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Your Honor, I move to withdraw as counsel. I was not made aware of any of these allegations. I would never have taken this case if I'd known." "Motion denied," Judge Morrison said sharply. "You'll sit there and finish this proceeding, Ms. Chun. Your client needs representation, even if it's reluctant. And frankly, you should have done more due diligence before filing forged documents with my court." Victoria sank back into her chair, her face pale, looking like a woman who just realized her career might be over. Marcus sat frozen, watching his entire life collapse in real time. His freedom, his reputation, his fortune, everything, crumbling to ash while his sister sat across the aisle, finally vindicated but devastated by what that vindication had cost. The truth had won. But the price had been their father's final months of peace, stolen by pure greed. Elena turned back to face the courtroom, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet but absolute. Your Honor, I'd like to call Marcus Williams to the stand. Victoria Chen shot to her feet. Objection. Your Honor, my client has a Fifth Amendment right. I'll testify. Marcus's voice cut through the room. He stood up, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with something that looked like rage mixed with desperation. I'll testify. I want to explain. Victoria grabbed his arm. Marcus, as your attorney, I'm advising you not to. He shook her off. I said I'll testify. The walk to the witness stand seemed to take forever. Marcus was sworn in, sat down, and straightened his tie with hands that weren't quite steady. He looked at Elena like a boxer who'd taken too many hits but refused to admit he was beaten. Elena approached slowly, carrying nothing but a single folder. She didn't need props anymore. She had something better, the truth, and a man arrogant enough to think he could talk his way out of it. Mr. Williams, did you forge psychiatric evaluations to make your sister appear mentally incompetent? I didn't forge anything. I paid for professional assessments. From a dead doctor? Marcus's mouth tightened. I was misled by the company I hired. That's not my fault. You paid a document forgery operation that's currently under FBI investigation. You knew exactly what you were buying. Elena opened the folder, showed him the invoice. This line item says, psychiatric evaluation, custom specifications. What were those custom specifications, Mr. Williams? I don't recall. Did you transfer $4.2 million from your father's estate into offshore accounts you controlled? Those were temporary transfers for investment purposes. Without documentation. Without your father's knowledge. While he had dementia and you held power of attorney. Elena's voice was scalpel sharp. Did you purchase a yacht with estate funds? That was a business investment. A yacht is a business investment? Yes. For entertaining clients. Your father's clients? The man with dementia who lived in a care facility. Elena didn't wait for an answer. Did you bill the estate $45,000 per month, while your father's actual care cost $8,000? Marcus's face flushed red. Premium care requires premium costs. Except he wasn't receiving premium care. He was receiving standard care while you pocketed $37,000 a month.
Elena stepped closer.
Did you prevent your sister from visiting your father? I limited visits because they upset him. They upset him? Or they interfered with your ability to manipulate him? Elena produced Dr. Mitchell's testimony. Your father asked for Emma every single day. You told him she'd abandoned him. You made him die believing his daughter didn't love him. She didn't deserve to be there. Marcus's voice cracked, rising. She never cared about building anything, never cared about success. She cared about your father. She cared about the money. Marcus was on his feet now, his composure shattering like glass. Don't act like she's some saint. She wanted her half of the estate just like I did. Actually, your father wanted her to have her half. To build a scholarship foundation. To help others. Elena's voice was perfectly calm. A stark contrast to Marcus's escalating fury. But you couldn't accept that, could you? Because in your worldview, a teacher making $60,000 a year doesn't deserve $20 million. She doesn't. Marcus exploded, his voice echoing off the courtroom walls. She didn't earn it. She teaches Shakespeare to teenagers. She makes nothing. I built an empire. I manage billions. I earned that money more than she ever could. The courtroom went dead silent. Elena stood perfectly still, letting his words hang in the air like toxic smoke. She let the silence stretch. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, until everyone in the room understood exactly what they just heard. Then she spoke, her voice soft but devastating. You just testified under oath that you believe your value as a human being is measured by your bank account. She paused, looking at him with something that might have been pity. That tells this court everything it needs to know about who you are, Mr. Williams. Marcus stood there, breathing hard, realizing too late what he'd done. He'd given them the confession they needed, not just to the crimes, but to the rot at the center of his soul. Your Honor, Elena said, turning away from Marcus like he was no longer worth her attention. The defense rests. I believe Mr. Williams has made the prosecution's case far better than I ever could. Judge Morrison looked at Marcus with something close to disgust. Mr. Williams, sit down. He stumbled back to his seat, and Victoria Chun wouldn't even meet his eyes anymore. He'd destroyed himself with his own words, and every person in that courtroom had witnessed it. Judge Morrison didn't need time to deliberate. She'd seen enough, heard enough. She removed her glasses, set them on the bench, and looked directly at Marcus Williams with the kind of cold clarity that comes from 30 years of watching people at their worst. I've presided over hundreds of probate cases in this court, she began, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Family disputes over money, siblings fighting over estates, children contesting wills. But I have never, not once, seen anything as calculated, as cruel as what you've done, Mr. Williams. Marcus stared at his hands. This court finds that Emma Williams is the rightful beneficiary of 50% of Robert Williams's estate, as clearly intended by the decedent in his original will and confirmed by his personal physician, his handwritten letter, and every piece of credible evidence presented today. Emma's shoulders shook, but she didn't make a sound. Marcus Williams's share of the estate is hereby frozen pending criminal investigation. Mr. Williams, you are ordered to repay every dollar stolen from your father's accounts. $4.2 million plus interest, calculated at the statutory rate. If criminal charges result in conviction, additional restitution will be determined at that time. Judge Morrison's voice hardened even further. This court is referring this case to the district attorney for immediate prosecution on charges of elder abuse, financial exploitation of a dependent adult, fraud, forgery, and any other charges the DA deems appropriate. The evidence is overwhelming. She turned to Victoria Chun. Ms. Chun, you will cooperate fully with all investigations or face sanctions from this court and potential review by the State Bar. You should have known better than to file documents without proper verification. Victoria nodded stiffly, her face ashen. We're adjourned. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. Emma collapsed into Elena's arms, sobbing. Not from grief this time, but from relief so profound it felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. Elena held her friend, saying nothing, because nothing needed to be said. Marcus walked out of the courtroom in silence, flanked by security. He didn't look at his sister, didn't look at anyone. He was already gone. Not physically, not yet, but in every way that mattered. 6 months later, Emma stood in front of a beautiful community center in East Oakland, the neighborhood where her father had grown up. The building had been renovated with care, fresh paint, new windows, a library filled with books, computer labs humming with possibility. Above the entrance, brass letters gleamed in the California sun, the Robert Williams Scholarship Foundation. Emma wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm in a way it hadn't been for years. Next to her stood Elena Rodriguez. Not Justice Rodriguez today, just Elena, wearing jeans and a casual blazer, smiling like she'd just won the case of her life, which, in a way, she had. A small crowd had gathered. Students from Emma's school, teachers, community members. Dr. Mitchell was there, tears streaming down her face as she watched Robert's dream finally come to life. Emma held the scissors, her hands steady. My father believed that every child deserved a chance, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. He believed that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. This foundation will provide full scholarships to students who need them most. Students like he was, like I teach every day. This is his legacy. This is what he wanted the money to mean. She cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. Elena squeezed her shoulder. He'd be so proud of you. I wish he'd known, Emma whispered. I wish he'd known I never abandoned him. He knew, Elena said softly. In the end, somewhere in his heart, he knew. Marcus Williams was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for elder abuse and fraud. He lost his financial licenses, his hedge fund dissolved, and his assets were seized to pay restitution. When he was released, he moved into a small studio apartment in Sacramento and took a job doing data entry for $18 an hour. His yacht was sold at auction. His Miami penthouse foreclosed. He never spoke to his sister again. Emma kept teaching. She still made $60,000 a year, still bought supplies for her students out of her own pocket, still stayed late to tutor kids who needed help. The money sat in trust accounts, carefully managed, funding scholarships and community programs exactly as her father had dreamed. Don't you want to retire? Elena asked her once over coffee. Emma smiled. Why would I? This is what I love. Late one evening, Emma sat alone in her small apartment. The same apartment she'd lived in for 15 years. The one Marcus had mocked as proof of her failure. She pulled out her father's letter. The paper soft now from being unfolded and refolded so many times, and read it again. You were the child who loved people, not money. Tears filled her eyes, but she was smiling. I love you too, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. I hope I made you proud. Outside, the city lights glittered like promises. And somewhere out there, kids who'd grown up with nothing, just like Robert Williams once had, were opening acceptance letters to colleges they'd thought they could never afford, funded by a man who remembered what it meant to be hungry, and a daughter who'd never forgotten what really mattered. The money had been a weapon in Marcus's hands. In Emma's, it became hope, and that made all the difference. If the story moved you, if you believe that character matters more than bank accounts, hit that subscribe button. We bring you real stories about real people, the kind of justice that reminds us the world isn't completely broken. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have had the courage to fight like Emma did? Or do you know someone who stood up against impossible odds? Share their story below. And if you think someone needs to hear this today, someone who's being underestimated, someone fighting alone, share this video. Let them know that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. More stories like this are coming. Stories that matter. Stories that restore your faith in humanity. Don't miss them. Subscribe now, because the world needs more Emmas and fewer Marcuses. See you in the next one.